I think he should go nuts next year if he stays healthy.
Yeah, agreed. I think the power that he could potentially give you is just, you can't pass that up, at least as a late first round type of guy.
Yeah, it's nice to get him like on the turn too, and then you can get a starting pitcher or something. But I went with Trey Turner, the first pick of the second round, 13th overall. He's been a little bit of a letdown in what amounts to his first full major league season, but he does currently have the major league lead in stolen bases with 40, and he's hit 17 home runs, 65 RBIs, 94 runs scored in 152 games. So not really much to complain about. And I think we would both agree that he can be much better offensively moving forward. Just turned 25 years old in June. He's mostly hit second for the Nationals this year. That spot could change next year. Either way, he'll be close to the top of the lineup, I would guess. The OBP hasn't been great, so maybe he moves down to like fifth or something. But the speed, like we discussed earlier, gives him a high floor, and I think he hasn't come close to reaching his ceiling in terms of power and runs batted in and whatnot.
Another bounce back guy and another National, at least for now, Bryce Harper. I took him 14th overall. I guess you could call him a bounce back guy potentially. I mean, he's hitting 247 on the year. Still, you look at the second half, Harper's hitting 304 with a 444 on base percentage, has 34 homers and 97 RBIs on the year, double-digit steals again, so more active on the base pass. Elite power. I think this is another tough one like Machado. His stock could change depending on where he winds up this offseason. Maybe we give the Nationals the early edge, but I mean, who knows? It could be the Dodgers. Maybe the Yankees get creative and figure something out. I mean, who knows what's going to happen over the winter.
The Cubs.
Cubs have always been mentioned as a possibility. So Harper's another one of those guys with me, just like Altuve. I couldn't let him fall too far. Just the potential's way too high. So yeah, I mean, to get him with the second pick of the second round, I think you have to feel pretty good about that.
Yep. And then 15th overall, Jacob deGrom. Had to snipe him from you, DJ. I knew you would probably have taken him next, or maybe not.
Probably.
DeGrom is, this year's ERA king, unless something goes horribly wrong. Upped his strikeout rate big time. Now up there in the elite stratosphere with that category. It's easy to predict there will be a lot more wins coming for him next year if he again delivers an ERA below 1.80 and strikes out a batter and a half per inning. Just as a general thought, I think you're going to want to be aggressive on top tier starting pitchers and drafts next spring, like you were last spring. That was definitely the strategy. Power is up around the game, and there just aren't that many aces. Scherzer, Sale, and DeGrom all came off the board here within our top 15.
Yeah, I think you should expect that once again. I mean, we saw that this spring as well with Kershaw was in, early first round with Scherzer right there, and then it was Sale and Kluber. So, if you need to grab those guys early, for sure. So 16th overall, I went with Christian Yelich. This is another guy on the rise, sort of like Bregman. Just a really solid all-around player who continues to progress. 2 cycles in the past couple of weeks. I think the biggest question for Yelich has been how much power he'll provide. But he's really exploded here in the second half with 20 homers. Only Chris Davis with the A's has hit more in that time. Yelich now up to 31 homers and 20 steals, over 100 runs scored, hits for average, gets on base, really does everything you'd want. The home run to fly ball rate, though, is really insanely high. He can't maintain that realistically, but he has lofted the ball more over the past couple of months. You look at things like hard hit rate and average exit velocity. Yelich is right there among the league's best. He's truly elite in those areas. So plenty of reasons to feel good about him, even if he can't maintain this power pace. Just a guy who makes an impact across the board. And, to get those guys early, that's really important.
Yeah, the Brewers have a great contract there, too. He's locked up through 2022, making just $7 million this year, $9 million next year. I think it's 12 and then 14 after that.
Yeah, and he's in a better park for offense too, I should say, than he was in Miami. So, good situation there.
I went 17th overall, Paul Goldschmidt. Goldschmidt fell into a weird slump in May, but he's been mashing since early June and will finish with a really strong overall stat line. Doesn't steal bases at a high rate anymore at age 31, but I think still probably the best fantasy option at the first base position. You can lock him in for 30-plus homers, 100-plus RBIs, 100-plus runs scored, and close to a 300 batting average. It's worth noting that 2019 will be a contract year for him. So the way the market shakes out for power hitting first baseman, I think he'll need to put together a big season to get a hefty contract, even though he does have a lot of star power. I wonder if he'll get a bigger contract than Eric Hosmer got. Probably not because of the age.
Probably not. Yeah. But no doubt he's bounced back really well. 18th overall, and this was a tough call for me, but I went with Corey Kluber. I had Kluber as my number 4 overall starting pitcher in our ranking episode last week, so I stuck with that order here. But I'm willing to, reevaluate that during the offseason. I think you can definitely make the case that Kluber has slipped a little. I mean, he definitely has. The strikeout rate has taken a noticeable dip, but still a really solid year overall. 2.93 ERA in 31 starts. Still over a strikeout per inning with elite control. He's going to be one of the top starting pitchers off the board. Like we just said, Scherzer, Sale, DeGrom are the no doubt top 3, but I think there's room for debate after that. But I think the track record is what puts Kluber here with me.
19th overall, Trevor Story. We actually made these picks on Tuesday when Story's status was a little more uncertain. If he comes through the elbow issue without any lingering problems, this week or next week, and there's no off-season surgery or anything like that, there might be a case that he should go higher than 19th overall.
Yeah.
Outrageous numbers this year at age 25, 33 home runs, 102 RBIs, 26 stolen bases, kind of out of nowhere. I mean, who knew that he had that kind of base stealing ability in him? So maybe some regression will come in 2019, especially in the base stealing department, but maybe he takes another step forward in other areas of his game. He's still a relatively young player, will be 26 next season. You've got the Coors Field effect. There's a whole lot to like about a healthy Trevor Story in fantasy.
20th overall, I went with Freddie Freeman. I think you could say maybe that Freeman's season has been a bit of a disappointment from a fantasy perspective. Just 23 homers, down from 28 in 117 games last year. He had 34 in 158 games in 2016. His fly ball rate is actually down around 10% from where he was last year, so I think that's definitely worth watching, but still Freeman's a very solid all-around option. Hits for average, gets on base. The supporting cast is getting better and better there in Atlanta and should probably only still improve as time goes on here. Maybe we'll see a boost in power next year. He's in a good setting in that ballpark for a left-handed batter. Freeman has even reached double digits in steals for the first time this year, so that's a nice little bonus. I think you should feel pretty safe if Freeman's your first baseman. I do think Goldschmidt's sort of reestablished himself after there were some questions this spring, but I think Freeman's right on his heels still.
Yeah, I agree with that. 21st overall, Ronald Acuna.
All right.
Yeah. In the middle of that crazy power surge he put together last month, I had people asking me on Twitter with whether he should or would be a first-round pick next season. I think there is probably a case to be made for that.
Yeah.
If he goes on some kind of tear in the playoffs, gets more exposure, maybe the hype does launch him up there in some drafts. I mean, From what he's done up to this point, Acuna's production through his first 101 major league games extrapolated out to 162. We're talking 42 home runs, 91 RBIs, 22 stolen bases, 117 runs scored.
Sounds like a first-round pick to me.
Yeah, it does. And there's the 293 batting average, the 941 OPS. Those are huge fantasy totals, and I'd say his ceiling actually goes higher than that. I mean, he's doing this at 20 years old.
Yeah, he has a Trout. He has a Trout ceiling for fantasy.
Yep. I think he can and will steal more bases than what we've seen. Could he be a 40 homer, 40 stolen base guy? Is that probably the high watermark?
Oof. I guess so. I guess so. I wouldn't rule it out, honestly.
I know. I wouldn't either. I think he could be a 50 homer, 40 steal guy.
Okay.
The only players in MLB history to go 40-40 are Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, prime Jose Canseco, and prime Alfonso Soriano.
Crazy.
But yeah, we could be talking about him as the second best player in baseball next year. I really think that.
Yeah. 22 overall, I have Javier Baez, and Baez is a guy I could see actually being a regression candidate, but I think he's probably going to go in the first 2 rounds next year. Baez has brought his strikeout rate down to a really reasonable level at this point. He's at 25% this year. Remember back in 2014, he was striking out in 41.5% of his plate appearances, so he's made a lot of progress in that area, but he's still very aggressive at the plate, doesn't walk a lot. This season, only Corey Dickerson with the Pirates has swung more often than Baez. Chases a lot of pitches outside of the strike zone. So I think we could see some batting average dip. There's some risk there with him. And since he doesn't walk much, could cut into the runs scored. But you have to like the power and the speed. 33 homers and 21 steals this year. He's also eligible all over the place. Second base, shortstop, third base. So just a really useful guy to have on your roster, giving you power and speed and versatility. No doubt, second round guy for me, I think. Stock on the rise with him for sure.
23rd overall, Garrett Cole. I wanted to stay on brand here because I picked Cole as my number 4 overall starter for 2019 on last week's show, and I stand by that. The strikeout rate has reached new heights for him in Houston, 12.5 K per 9. That actually leads all qualified starting pitchers since Sale doesn't have the innings to qualify. 2.88 ERA, 1.04 WHIP, 14-5 record. He just turned 28 years old. Doesn't have the wear and tear of some of the other top tier starting pitchers. I think it's a real possibility we see even better from him next season in like the ERA department and wins, though obviously that doesn't always fall on a starting pitcher.
And I'm finishing things up here, 24th overall, the final selection. I was debating a number of names with this final pick, but I went with Charlie Blackmon with the Rockies. Blackmon predictably wasn't able to maintain the numbers he put up last year. Big drops in batting average, OPS, RBIs, but still a useful all-around fantasy outfielder. 27 homers, 12 steals, 109 runs scored. Batting average still useful, even though it's dropped a bit. Blackmon is 32 years old now, so we've probably already seen his peak. I think that's fair to say, but another player in Coors Field, so gives you that safe floor with the lineup in the ballpark. I'm certainly willing to hear arguments with, you look at the guys that we haven't mentioned here. Carlos Correa, Clayton Kershaw. 24 players deep, and we haven't mentioned Clayton Kershaw. Giancarlo Stanton, you can make a case for him.
Benintendi.
Yeah, Benintendi. Other starting pitchers, Justin Verlander, Aaron Nola.
Yeah. Chris Bryant, I think, is a good bounce back. Gary Sanchez, even.
Yeah, he could definitely reestablish himself as a top fantasy catcher again. So, the top of the drafts are just so loaded with talent. But I think as you get into that second round, maybe the second half of the second round, I think it could go any number of directions. As we get into drafts in the spring. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all comes together. And, the offseason could change things too, depending on where certain players end up.
Yep.
So I think we're going to finish things up here with some streaming options. If you're in your fantasy playoffs or just trying to finish the season on a high note. Drew, I'm going to give you the floor for your streamers first.
Adam Wainwright on Saturday at home against the Giants. Wainwright was in vintage form last Sunday night versus the Dodgers. Allowed just 2 hits, struck out 9 batters over 6 scoreless innings in a big 5-0 victory for the Cardinals. Had the curveball working really well. The fastball velocity was up a little bit, though still not really what you want. But the matchup here against San Francisco is a good one. The Cardinals are in must-win territory. I think probably the best streamer that would be on a waiver wire this weekend.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And then Ryan Borucki on Sunday with the Blue Jays hosting the Rays. Borucki threw 8 scoreless innings with 7 strikeouts in his last start Monday against the Orioles, allowed just 3 hits and 1 walk. Obviously, the Rays are a much better team than the Orioles, but Borucki went 6 strong innings against Tampa Bay on September 4th. He's gone at least 6 innings and allowed 2 runs or fewer in 10 of his 15 starts this season, kind of flying under the radar. He's put together a pretty good year for Toronto.
Piggybacking on that Wainwright recommendation, which, as I said, I'm into that as well, I think you have to give John Gant another chance this weekend against the Giants. Gant's coming off a poor start against the Dodgers, but he was really pretty good before that, kind of sneaky. He had 7 straight starts with 2 earned runs or fewer. Has a 3.69 ERA in 17 starts this year. Control isn't great, so